Hot takes incoming. I've got 5 NBA players poised for breakouts in the upcoming year. You tell me if I'm right or wrong. Let's data dive. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Data Dive powered by Market Movers. My name is Tyler Nethercott, better known as Teapot. And after a collector focus video last week, I'm ready to dive back into some juicy speculation so that all of you can tell me why I've lost my mind down in the comments below. I'll be sure to react to football kicking off next week, but we can't forget that basketball will indeed be here again before we know it, and I've got my eyes on a few players who I think could really shine. As always, this video is brought to you by Market Movers. Visit marketmoversapp.com and use promo code DIVE when you check out. That now gets you 14 days completely free to try out Market Movers and then 20% off for life as long as you're subscribed. What are you waiting for? Go check out Market Movers. And now let's get into the data. Okay, I gotta do it. The usual disclaimers. I don't have a crystal ball. I've been wrong before and I'll be wrong again. I shared some of my mistakes I've made recently on this channel. So if you like to speculate, like I do from time to time, go with what you believe, not what I say. And with that out of the way, let's get into my number one pick, a player who I think will break out this year, who could have a really good chance to shine, and that is Mel Bridges. Bridges is the Vegas favorite for most improved player this coming year. He finished last season with the Nets with 26 points per game, 4.5 boards, 3 assists, 1.6 combined blocks and steals, and fantastic scoring efficiency. Bridges is a two-way player with a 7'1" wingspan who can honestly score pretty much at will. So I want to jump over and look at a few of his most common kind of cards. These are a step up, obviously, from the base cards. We've got his Prism Silver and his Optic Hollow, and this is over the last 180 days. Now, obviously, the NBA season ended about 3 months ago, back in June with the finals, but many of those teams were bounced prior to the finals. Obviously, you only have 2 teams there. A 6-month look back tends to be a little bit better view in terms of when a lot of players were at their hype heading toward the playoffs before many of them cooled down. So if we look at that for Bridges, he really had a chance once he went to the Nets to shine. It's almost kind of like a little bit silly to say he's going to be most improved this year because really that started last season, in my opinion. Once he got over to the Nets and he was one of the guys, if not the guy on that team, he started to take over and had many, many really impressive games. So if we look at these cards over the last 6 months, we've got his Prism Silver and a PSA 10. This card's actually down 36% over the last 6 months. You can see pretty much holding flat for the time being right now here. And his PSA 9 down 27%, very similar. PSA 9 Optic Hollow, pop 34, very low pop. This card only cost you $21 on its last sale back at the end of July. That's down 18%. Now here's what's crazy. Mel Bridges does not have a PSA 10 Optic Hollow rookie card in existence. PSA has never had one. PSA 9 is the highest available copy, and there's only 34 of them. So a lot of times we talk about Prism versus Optic. Some people prefer them just from a pure collectability standpoint, one over the other. But in my opinion, going after these 9s at $21, knowing that they're the highest graded available copy for PSA, seems like a pretty good deal. I'm actually going to look to pick one of these up if I can track one down. Not exactly an easy task necessarily because there's only 34 of them in existence. So maybe an opportunity to look at SGC, BGS. If there are any CGC ones out there, those could be really good options. But I really like Bridges as my number one pick to potentially blow up this year. Shifting gears, my number 2 pick this year to break out. This one might be a little more polarizing, but I know some of you are with me, and that is Desmond Bane. If Mel Bridges is an efficient scorer, Bane is just as good, with both players last year hovering around 61% true shooting in that 2022-23 season. Now, Bane is another guy who plays on both sides of the ball, and while his wingspan is actually shorter than he is at 6'4", he's built like a brick house, and he's capable of physical style of play that Bridges isn't necessarily capable of. And guess what? Ja Morant, he's out the first 25 games, and the Grizzlies have a really solid, gritty roster, one that will absolutely need Bane to be one of the leaders, if not the leader, in scoring. So let's jump over, similarly, look at some of Desmond Bane's cards over the last 180 days. And in my opinion, there's some real value to be had here. For example, this PSA 9 just sold a copy at the end of August. Somebody, in my opinion, got a steal on this card. I don't know how I missed this. I would have bought this for, absolutely without hesitation. $15.60. Obviously, maybe you got to factor shipping into that for $5 or something, but $15.60. That card is down 48%. So if we go back over the last 6 months, that card had a high of almost $50, having recently sold for $15.60. Look at the multiplier compared to the PSA 10, which just sold for $150. Now I know the pop, it looks like about a 40% gem rate compared to this, relative to the PSA 9. But there's still not a ton of these in existence. That 2020 class was actually pretty tough to get a gem on, a PSA 10, because of centering issues across the board with those Panini Prism products. And then we come down to Optic. We've got his Optic Holo PSA 9 and PSA 10. Also, low pop counts, in my opinion, and similar story here at $15.50 on the PSA 9 Optic Holo. But all things considered, if I'm comparing those two, I'm for sure going for that silver over the Optic Holo. So I want to come down here and actually see with the PSA 9 on the silver, if that's kind of just a fluke, or if there's actually other ones selling for around that price point. You can see there was one on auction that apparently sold for $40. This is always when things get a little funky. We try to be, kind of generous. And here, actually, I see why I didn't spot this card. This one sold over on Golden Auctions. Now, I will tell you, Golden has a lot of really high caliber cards that do very well on their auctions. In my opinion, I would never, ever sell a card like this on Golden or any site other than eBay, because you don't get the eyeballs on it. I'm not actively over on Golden all of the time looking for cards for sale there, because they're usually out of my price range. This one would have been in my price range and I completely missed it. So this is a little more to be expected, hovering around maybe the $20 to $25 mark, but that's still, in my opinion, very low relative to the PSA 10 price. So that's my number 2 pick, Desmond Bane. Let's shift gears over to number 3. And this, I'll admit, it's totally a homer pick, and it's Cade Cunningham. Now, I hope I'm not deluding myself here. The former number 1 overall pick has battled injuries, but when he has played, it has been with a certain smoothness and composure that you don't always see in young players. He is not a guy who is easily rattled. There have been a number of comparisons to Cade's game, including to players like Grant Hill, DeMar DeRozan, or even to Luka Doncic. Now, I don't expect Cade to rise to that level, to the level of Luka. I really don't. I'm a realist, not an idealist. But I do hope that someday Cade's ceiling can put him in the 10 to 20 best players in the NBA range at any given time. And one other guy he kind of reminds me of is Brandon Roy. Unfortunately, both Grant Hill and Brandon Roy had careers that were completely marred by injuries. I hope that the same won't be the case for Cade. So let's jump over and look at his cards as well. Last 180 days, you know the story, same cards, Prism Silver and Optic Holos. Also relatively low pop counts, very low gem rate. In 2021, very low, pop 156 on the PSA 10s compared to pop 517 on the PSA 9. And you see, as a result of that, a massive price premium. Looks like almost an 8x multiple from the 9 to the 10. I've said it many times in the past. I think 9s are fine. I don't think you need to be ready to shell out $400 and put that in as a risk into Cade Cunningham if you want to get into one of those cards. Look into the PSA 9 for $54 or even a PSA 9 Optic Holo for $35. Both of those could be good choices. Again, if you're looking at speculation, I'm not going to be one that says long-term buying silvers, buying holos, all of these cards are the best picks for long-term viability of cards. But in the speculation game, commodity and regular transaction liquidity actually plays really nicely. It can be very easy to get into these cards and to get out because they're transacting regularly. If you buy something obscure like a random blue to 99 or whatever, sometimes those cards can be a little bit harder to move if there wasn't a recent comp and if somebody isn't ready to jump into it at whatever the next price point is. So overall, I really like Cade. I'm not super optimistic about the Pistons this upcoming season. However, I loved the head coach hire. I love a lot of the things that they're doing. They've got some interesting pieces. It just remains to be seen if they can put it all together. So number 3, my guy, Cade Cunningham. Now, pick number 4. This one is going to get some of you fired up. I'm saying Austin Reeves, Hillbilly Kobe, as they call him. I just can't help it. I love this kid's game. I love his story. I love that he continues to defy all the haters. He does it all of it. He's the quintessential culture guy that any championship caliber team should want to have. Reeves flourished in games with an elevated role last year, averaging 16 points, 4.5 assists, and 3.2 boards without LeBron in the lineup. and the Lakers had a nearly identical win percentage in games with or without LeBron, largely because of Reeves, I like to think. So I know 16 points per game isn't insane, but I can't help but root for the underdog, and the truth is that I think a lot of people feel the same way. Plus, he's on the Lakers, so there's already sort of a baked-in demand for his cards. I think there's going to be a lot of attention on Reeves this year, much like what Alex Caruso had a few years ago when he got buzzy and had that sort of strong cult following. Reeves averaged 21 points a game in the series with the Nuggets. That was when the Lakers were obviously eventually eliminated by the eventual champions. Now, Reeves is near the top of the list also, much like Mel Bridges, for most improved player frontrunners right now. Now, if we shift over, he does not have nearly as many rookie cards as some of these guys. Why? Because he wasn't a top-tier draft pick like a lot of these players. He was sort of a surprise emergence. So he doesn't have any Optic rookie cards. He does have Prism, he has Mosaic, he has Select. I'm looking at over the last 90 days, and you can see that his price change was up 21%. If we look over the last 180, he's up 48%. Now shifting over to his cards, you can scroll in here. I'm just kind of looking at which cards have had the highest sales volume. Not surprising to see that Prism Base obviously has had the most of those. That card, it's going to be a low dollar card. When you start grading some of these, similar to, like I said, 2020, 2021 also had a lot of really challenges grading Prism cards. The quality wasn't really there. So there's not a lot of these in circulation. In fact, I think if we come over here and we'll look, we'll just see how many PSA 10 Prism Silvers does he have. Only 27. And if I look at the PSA 9, only 82. So not a lot of these cards circulating around. That is always one kind of got you. One way that you might want to pause is if you suspect that a player is going to get hot, that there might be a backlog of their cards at PSA that could oversaturate or kind of flood out more copies of supply available. Sometimes that can create price compression and drive the prices down for a particular card. But in the case of Reeves, because he just didn't have a lot of products featuring his rookie cards, I think there could be some opportunity with these. So you pick your poison on it if you like. Hillbilly Kobe like I do. Find one that you think is a cool card, maybe a Prism Silver or something to that effect. Maybe take a stab at getting it graded if it looks good and see where it goes. But I like his upside, and I think he's going to have a pretty important role with the Lakers this year. All right, my fifth and final pick. This is going to be the most polarizing, I really think. And some of you will for sure love it. Some of you are going to yell at me in the comments, and that is Jordan Poole. That's right, the guy who pulled up from 32 feet to lose it for the Warriors when he had two of the greatest three-point shooters in history on his team. But you know what? I didn't think it was a bad shot. It wasn't a bad shot. He was wide open, he's confident, and he missed. But if he had made that shot, we'd be having a totally different conversation about how he has killer instinct and moxie. Poole then got exiled from the best team, starting with a W, over to the worst team, starting with a W. But I think he's got a lot of opportunity to put up some really gaudy numbers with the Wizards. He and Kyle Kuzma could, I think, realistically average a combined 55 points per game. Last year, without Steph Curry in the lineup, Poole averaged 26 points per game. He's going to be given total license to shoot in Washington. He could legitimately put up 28 to 30 points per game and maybe 6 to 7 assists. So I'm going to jump over, similarly, look at some of his cards. He's back from the 2019 draft class, and what a journey it's been for that draft class and their cards overall, as we know. So scrolling down, same thing, same story here, last 180 days. I've got his Optic Holo and his Prism Silver. And at 16 bucks, 40 bucks for the silver and for the holos, I think both of these could be strong buys. I might be looking for something a little bit cheaper on the PSA 9. You can see that that one recently had some bigger sales. Has averaged about $29 over the last 180 days. So once I see that, multiple getting closer to 3.5, 4x, that's when I maybe am not, looking for that price, because sometimes you can find deals at a bigger price gap on these particular cards. Now you can see in the case of 2019, there's actually more PSA 10s than there are PSA 9s, which is part of the reason why that ratio gap is going to be a lot tighter. Optic Holos have always been a much tougher gem in general for many products, and you can see that here with fewer of them at Pop 120 versus Pop 151 on the 10s to the 9s. But of these four cards, looking to scoop these, especially if you've got one of the big consigners or somebody selling a lot of listings and you can get combined shipping or hop over to ComC or something like that, at 16 bucks, I'd definitely be a player on this Optic Holo. In fact, if we pop this open and we just look at the card, or the chart rather, for this card, I can look at the last 180 days, and let's see that this card, was up to 31 bucks. If I go back, let's see, 365 days when there was even more hype around Poole, he was, close to $60 on this PSA 9, and like I said, down around $15 now. I don't think that's an unrealistic jump if he's out there just splashing threes and getting to the bucket and doing a lot of things. I don't know. I have him at my number 5 spot. I feel a lot better about the first 3 guys on my list. I don't know what type of traction there's going to be around, the Washington Wizards market, but Poole, I think, could be a guy up near the top of the league, maybe in the top 10 in terms of points per game this season. And if that's the case, I do think there will be a big bump on his cards. Now, those are my 5 guys, but I have one final guy that I have to mention, or I'm just going to get yelled at for sure in the comments, and that's Anthony Edwards. Ant-Man. The hype around him is absolutely undeniable. I get it. He's awesome. I like watching him. It's kind of surprising. I don't think it has everything to do with the FIBA World Cup and all of this stuff. He just kind of has that it factor and has been organically gaining a lot of respect. He talks about how he doesn't like it when players rest in games, how they don't play. He wants to give back to the fans, just like Kobe and Jordan used to say. Everybody loves him, and I expect great things from Ant-Man. I think the hype is here to stay. Regardless of what happens with Minnesota this year, I like him to hold solid prices throughout the season. So if we close out, we'll jump over and look at these 6 guys. They're PSA 9 Prism Silvers. 9s are fine. And you can see Ant-Man for sure at $160, commanding a massive premium over the rest of these guys. Sort of interesting to look at that with a player like Cade, who has, really high potential in my opinion, the highest ceiling, certainly I would think, of all of these guys other than Anthony Edwards. To see that gap from $160 down to $54, that's a pretty big gap. And then if we close it out here, you can see Bane, like I said, down here at $15, that's a bit of a fluke with that golden sale. But a lot of these, even around $25 to $30, if I can get in at that price point, that definitely to me is reasonable. You could hedge. Like I said, you don't have to go big into the 10s. You could get a 9 of 1 or 2 or 3 or none of these guys if you don't like any of them. But those are the types of plays that I'm looking for. I've already picked up a few cards of some of these guys, so that's a full disclosure. We will see what happens during this NBA season. So what do you think? Have I lost my mind? Let me know down in the comments as always. And while you are down there, do me a huge favor and like this video. Make sure to subscribe, share it with a friend. Thanks so much for watching. Until next time, happy investing, keep on collecting, and make sure to have fun.